All right, so welcome back to the second session today, and over to you, Barry.
All right, thank you. So I will, in case people missed the link, I'll drop it into the chat so you can pop up the slides and follow along and have the links to the slides. That's the other part of it, is these days I like to do things in Google Slides because it allows for lots of collaboration. So pop it up there. So how do we build coalitions? I mean, you've heard it many times before. People say, you know, what protects the internet isn't so much all the little knobs and packets and ACLs and things like that that we do. It's actually people collaborating together, right, to do it all. It's you can't be by yourself and fend off the miscreant threat vectors today. You got to have a tribe and a community of people. So key takeaways, you'll hear this term trust groups. The trust groups are kind of like the real force behind the scenes. It's hard for people to understand that this is what's going on in the community, but these trust groups are real, they're active. It's professionals like those of us here. These are how the trust groups start. They start at forums like APRICOT, NANOG, security conferences of different types. And they're of all types of people, right? And we'll walk through how that is, how these trust groups are built, how you build your communities, because you have a communities that you're part of and communities around you, right? There are a whole bunch of people that I can call upon and help get help because I'm scratching my head trying to figure out a problem or I need some help. You know, you reach out and talk to people, right? So this is counter to the traditional view of security. Traditional view of security from like people who don't understand this sort of collaborative operational model think that, oh, it's some organization that does the security. You know, it's some authority, very, you know, very machoistic, top-down, you know, authoritarian. We are in charge. We will take care of things. Doesn't really work on the way the internet model, because the internet model is a collaborative, bottom-up sort of collaborative effort. So this kind of like it counters it. Now, there are still huge roles for having different groups out there. This presentation is evolving. I'm adding a whole bunch of new materials. So, you know, stay tuned. A couple of months from now, I'll do another like webinar, you know, do like a hour and a half and walk through this again with updated materials about how these other roles, you know, other things would be added, right? So this is kind of like the part one, version 1.0 of it. Now, different groups out there will specialize, right? You'll have groups that cover the overview. Like there is one group on the OPSEC trust infrastructure, which is the main group that discusses, here's the big picture, what's happening. You'll have groups that focus like SCADASEC, helped to get the SCADASEC group going. Then I left it because I wasn't doing anything on critical power plants and things like that for a while. Then I joined it about 6 months ago because I started doing more of that work. And it's a strong, vibrant community who's very specialized in how do we secure a oil refinery? How do we secure an electrical plant? How do we, you know, critical infrastructure? How do you secure a railroad, right? There are groups that evolved that focus on malware, dissecting malware. Yasmel was an old group that's now been closed down. II still exists. And there's other groups out there that focus on malware. Everybody, all the antivirus vendors talk to each other. They don't just compete, but behind the scenes, malware is exchanged all the time. The service provider community will use NSPSec as an example, but NSPSec is, you know, we're about to probably close it up and migrate it to other forums. There's other forums where backbone operators actually collaborate on today. There's a group that does takedown. So in other words, if we have zones that bad guys are using, we take it down. DNS ORIC, as I mentioned yesterday, is the group that handles the DNS operations And DNS operations is used, sometimes it's a security issue. Most of the time it's something happened in the network or code or something. So it kind of handles both parts. There are different security communities. The MOG, which is going on right now, that's a message abuse working group. APWG, which is the anti-phishing working group, and other groups like that. So there'll be official organized groups who focus on a particular problem, like vulnerability management and incident response. That's the first organization, which I'll point out too, right? So you have different areas that focus on different things. You can't cover it all. You got to figure out one, right? And I'll mention, like with me, the areas that I focus on. Now, and it does it because threat vectors have evolved. As I mentioned before, our miscreants range from the cyber criminals, which are easy to understand because they're out there to make a criminal buck, right? The nation states are also easy to understand. They work for their government and institutions to achieve their national objectives. Right now, you got a cyber war going on, and in another screen off to the side, I'm watching videos of explosions going on in Ukraine as bullets are starting to fly and electronic warfare is starting to kick in. So EW is being kicked in. That's nation state. It's understand they have an agenda. What's going to also kick in around this conflict is you're going to have political protesters on both sides. So, you can have people in your country in Asia, and they can say, I don't like what's going on. And they'll decide to, I don't like what the Russians are doing, so I'm going to go and try to break into one of the nuclear power plants in Russia. Okay, and then all of a sudden, the Russians retaliate, and they're on your network, right? These things happen. These sort of, so it's, this crossfire will happen. You can't control passionate, smart geeks who go out there and have the tools and capacity to go out there and do things, right? So that's this threat vector out there, right? And then you have the corporate ones, right? These are subcontractors. So the nation state, they can't do it all, so they subcontract, right? So you're gonna get subcontractors involved with it, right? So these kind of like the big four of the threat vectors around it. And that pulls the different trust groups around. Different groups are focusing on different things, right? So this is why you'll have these different communities that happen with it. Now, where this really evolved is we had one of the original ones called DOS foes. And DOS foes was evolved off of the Panics attack in '97. And then that kind of faded away, but then DOS attacks started to happen, especially, like I've mentioned this, the 2000 February, the Mafia Boy attack that got the ISPs really woken up. But then in September 2002, an interesting thing happened. So September 2002, like the first week of September 2002, my wife is in Singapore running her company. I'm in here in California with my two little kids. I'm cooking dinner. It's 6 p.m. and I get a call, and the call comes in from the NCS Watch Desk. So the NCS Watch Desk in the United States is a national communications system. The national communications system was established to make sure that communication survives during a nuclear war. So I kind of know that from my Air Force days. So here's this captain from the NCS Watch Desk calling me up at my house. They go, okay, tomorrow there's going to be a special briefing by the White House in preparation for, expected activity around the anniversary of 9/11. This is September 2002, right? And so I get this call, and I go, okay, sure, I work for Cisco. I'll make sure somebody from Cisco is there, right? Okay, yeah, I can do that. He says, yes. Captain says, yes, but we need help. So what do you mean? He says, we need to get all this telecommunications and service providers on this call. I said, okay, do you have a list? No. Wait a minute, you don't have a list. You're the US government, you don't have a list. No. But we heard that you have a list. Me, I have a list. And by that time, because I'm doing these workshops and doing the training and things like that, I kind of knew a lot of people. I said, okay, it's 6 p.m. on California time. It's 9 p.m. there. Is this really, really important? Yes, it's really, really important. It says, you need to get everybody there. This is really important White House call. Yes, really important. Okay. All right. So give me the details and I'll start calling people. So we started calling people. We're like, 2 a.m. East Coast time, waking people up, says, you need to be on a call at 8 a.m. East Coast time. Here's a call, right? And then they put this like 3 different bridges together because there are so many people there because it's really important to be on there. And so then Mr. Richard Clark, you'll see him on TV every now and then. Richard Clark gets on there and says, well, tomorrow's the anniversary and something could happen. Want everybody to be on alert and be safe and make sure, everything's going to be okay. I'm like going like, ooh, I'm trying to hide because I'm the one who like started calling everybody, calling like all the big telcos. We had CEOs on the line, things like that, and all on there. And here you have Mr. Richard Clark saying, hey, if you see anything, let us know. We go, why are we on this call? And as soon as the call hung up, I started getting phone calls from all the telcos. It says, we don't want the US government organizing our security, right? And this was a water shift in industry, right? This is why we do these trust groups. Private industry working with private industry. This was the point where it all started after Mr. Richard Clark doing his great service and having a nonsense call, and everybody woke up and says, we need to collaborate with each other. And that was the big thing with it. This like, okay, figure out how we can do this. That was the start of NSPSec. And after a year, just a year of working on collaboration and doing things, and I have to give credit to like the key person who was really showing everybody the leadership with this was this gentleman, Chris Morrow. He now works for Google. At the time, he worked for WorldCom, Verizon, Unionet, right? And he would share out there, here's a DOS attack, and coordinate. He would share information. He would say, here's the details of the attack happening to my customer, and share it. And other people weren't used to sharing. And he would share it all the time. The Chris Morrow approach with it. It was really powerful. And people started going like, hey, we can collaborate and actually take care of things. We can actually collaborate and battle, right? And so by the time we got to 2003, he'd started getting these big communities. Communities started breaking up in the sense of specialization, right? The community started growing all over, right? So when you look at it, let me complete the story. I'm just going to jump ahead on slides so you can kind of see where this went with the NSPSec side. So what happens with, let's see, where's the NSPSec example? So with NSPSec, with this group was created after that part, it was mainly because people asked here, do we need to have security people? This wasn't security people, it was a bunch of backbone engineers, right? People who can control routers, understood NetFlow, understood routing protocols, throw up access lists, things like that, right? And, it allowed engineers to work collaboratively as a group and work one-on-one. I can find the people. I can find who I need to work on the different colleagues. It's still today, like every now and then on these trust groups, it says, hey, I need a contact over this organization. Somebody will give it to you and you call them up and you get things done. A lot of the work is that way. Hey, I need to call somebody who knows the routers at Facebook. You pop it up there in one of the trust groups and they say, here's a person up, you call them up and you go take care of business to get things done, right? That's what happens. It's a closed group. So what we started to do, because we closed it down but we hide in plain sight. So the trick to this, so you don't get in trouble by governments of being collusion, because in a lot of countries, collusion is illegal. You can't have 6 telcos all working together. That's illegal in the United States. You get collusion. You can't. It's called secret cabals. You can't do that. So you have to do it in a certain way where everything's kind of like right there. If you want to find information, here's, you can go to the site and look at it, right? You can say, here's what they do, right? And you have confidential information. So NSPSec was restricted to people kind of like, vetted in, right? Is what we call it. We vet them in to make sure you're not one of the bad guys and you're actually going to take action, right? And you can call up and say, hey, I'm a security guru, you should let me in. That's not enough. Are you going to can you touch a router? Can you do something? And then others who call says, I represent the government, you should let me in. Says, no, you're probably not going to do anything. You're probably going to sit there, lurk, and leak information. We don't need that. So you have this no lurker sort of principle that evolved out of NSPSec that you find in other trust groups, right? Because you also have the need to know, like, hey, I've been working, this is like a sanitization from Chris Morrow. I've been working on this /layer 2, and we're seeing traffic come from this ISP and this ISP and this ISP and others. The attack is hitting both ISPs on port 53, source for this. I got it filtered. I need some help. People start helping, right? Does everybody need to see that sort of details, right? You don't really need to see that sort of details. And this evolved, remember, when we talked about the different tool set, this is what evolved where, you know, this group would actually throw out black holes and we'd start whacking down. We had the early days of botnets and started whacking down botnets. Botnets will pop up, or whack them down, you know, black hole them across the internet with it. Now we got, you know, tools like others to make it easier. But then Slammer happened. And by then we started playing around with a phone system. We had the INOC DBA phone system up, and it was like one of those things again. My wife was working. She was over on a trip. I was with the kids, just put the kids to bed. They were young. And then all of a sudden the INOC DBA phone started going on, and we started troubleshooting SQL Slammer. All right. And what was interesting about it is the alarms for the NSPSec community, all the backbone engineers, started happening before the damage started going. So when you look at it, there was a colleague who was working at this company that I think got acquired and sucked into some place called Keynote at the time. And they published this stat that the NSPSec call started before there was a damage. So it was first seen at that point where it put it on there. And we had it identified and figured out how we're going to contain it and started doing it. And then the damage started happening, right? So the mitigation that we were doing started kicking in, and that led to how it was starting to be mitigated really, really quickly. So SQL Slammer was, you know, we had like, you know, as a call proceeded, we had like 40 people on. So when it was really taking off, we had like 40 people on the call. Everybody's putting filters in everywhere and collaborating, right? So inter-operator collaboration was key, right? So, and what capabilities they used? Remote trigger black hole, BGP response. We did sinkholes. We did backtracing, right? So that was the core thing with it. Everybody kind of learned from this, right? So I point out NSPSec because it was kind of like the first time this operational trust group model really started to shake out, and we learned a lot with it. It has evolved over the years. So what you'll find in different trust groups and different flavors of trust groups has evolved over time, and it evolved with some of these principles. So to tell the story here, so some of the core principles we have is we have these principles of chain of trust, sphere of trust, need to know, and a chain of action. So chain of trust is if I trust you and you trust him, then I can also trust him. So this is chain of trust. So when you vouch somebody in, it's like Lisa trusts Danny and Danny trusts Aswan, right? So, and Aswan trusts Bob. So a chain of trust says that Frank, okay, there's Frank trusts Bob. Then Frank can trust Bob and Frank, and also trust Lisa, because you have a chain of trust. So these trust groups work because I vet Philip Smith in, and somebody down the road can say, you know, a friend of a colleague of a colleague will trust that my relationship with Philip stands firm. I can call Philip directly, and I can know that Philip is going to take care and be confidential with the information and be able to take action on it. So that's the principle of chain of trust. You know, so that's why we get this concept of the trust group. And that turns into a group of a sphere of trust. So what a trust group is a sphere of trust. So if somebody breaks the trust, break the compact, you have a compact and says, everything on this trust group will be traffic light protocol red, but you leaked it to the press. Okay, you just broke trust. So a lot of times you get booted off, and the person who vouched for you gets booted off, right? Says, we can't trust you. We got to like clean up the trust, right? And so you get booted off, right? So that sphere of trust is important. On there, these work with multiple groups, and you gotta really FOMO. I should put this as a concept in the slides here. FOMO is something in Silicon Valley. FOMO is fear of missing out. FOMO. Oh, I got to be involved with everything. Fear of missing out. You just can't do it. All right, you just can't be involved. You got to in the amount of responsibilities we have in a network and the things we have to focus on, we have to really focus. We can't do everything. So you have to have different people in different swim lanes to take action. And you have to trust the other person in the other swim lane, right? And you don't need to know everything. Like for instance, there's activities that I'm involved with, and I know people in other swim lanes, and they say, hey, you should come over. I said, no, I don't need to do that. I can do what I need to do with what I need to know right now. I don't need to know what you guys are doing because you're doing investigative work. You know, there's a lot of times I don't like to do investigative work these days, like work with the police, because it takes up a lot of time. And in my younger days, when I have more energy, it's okay, but I'm a little bit older and I like to get my, not work on the weekends sort of thing, right? Sort of stuff. So a good example of need to know in action was the Battle of Normandy, right? There was a small number, just a small number, who knew exactly what was going on, right? And they kept it, that small number, the scope of the entire operation was kept within that small number of people. It is need to know, because if they spread out beyond that, it was a problem. Like this level of details, do you need to know it? It says, no, I do malware. Well, I don't need to know that. I'm working on malware. I'm working on something totally different, right? So in a need to know, you have your sphere of trust, and then a smaller group who has a need to know for a particular information. And that's something from a security and maturity you have to get over. You have to get over the point of, oh, I got to know everything. No, I'd be comfortable with what I'm doing. Everybody has a part. Then you have the sphere of action. Sphere of action is, are you going to do something? Hey, I need help. Silence, crickets, right? Like forums like this, you got to get used to asking questions. You got to get used to saying, I'm taking action. I'm doing something, right? I know it's really counter to a lot of, the cultural norms in Asia Pacific region, but this is one of the key areas of success. If you want to be successful in doing broader security work, you got to ask questions, be interactive, and then take action, right? And take action is you got to trust your partner to act. I'm going to do something. I'm trusting you to do your part, right? In football or in rugby, right? You pass the ball without looking. Because if I look before I pass the ball, then I'm signaling to the opposition. I just got to trust that there's going to be a person behind me, and when I pass the ball back, they're going to take it. That level of action, that's an actionable trust. That's the partner part, and that's one of the key things of good, successful trust groups versus trust groups that are kind of like struggle, in taking things. There's the expectation of action, on through the thing, right? So it's what we call operational trust. So trust is a bet that an entity, which you cannot control, will meet the expectations that are favorable to your cause. That's trust. Operational trust is required from every person, earned by every entity to accomplish. You got to get action. There's an action part of it, right? So this is where the stewardship that you have when you're part of these trust groups, you got a stewardship factor with it. So these kind of like the fundamental things we kind of learn from NSPSec of how to do these trust groups, and it's evolved quite evolved over the years. So let me jump ahead here. So let's talk about building up your upstream connections. Let's build your security communities. Let's see, hitting the wrong button. There's the button I want. All right, so in building the connections, right? First thing you do is you got to know, this is right off the bat, who are your network engineer and security people at all your peers and all your exchange point partners and your transit partners. Call them first. That's the first thing you do, right? Get them on LinkedIn, get their phone numbers, get them on WhatsApp, get them on Signal, get them on Telegram, get them whatever, right? you find out who they are, you start connecting to them, you get them on the phone, you have meetings with them. That's the first stage of the relationship. That's your first mesh. That's, don't, you jump ahead to try to do something different. That is the core fundamentals for a DDoS resiliency plan, is to have that type of relationship with the directly connected partners to your network. And then you extend it by who are the security people you can rely upon in your vendors. If you got Cisco equipment, who's the Cisco person you call? Not the sales guy, but the technical engineer who understands how the routers work, right? The Juniper person, you name your network equipment, the A10 person, the, Arista person, right? Who are the core people of that? Then the next thing, we got to do a habit of learning from your peers, right? Now, tomorrow I'll talk about meaningful conversations. And here's something that I recommend that you do. When you, as a organization, pull in a vendor and to give security talks, control the agenda. Control the agenda by saying, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to actually share your wisdom so I can actually gain more. Not just your product and product pitch. I want to find out who, what do you do? What's your experience? What's your habits? What's your wisdom? How can I tap into that? So I'm going to use me as an example, right? This is what I do. So here's the things you send to them. You send to them, okay, you bring in somebody in to talk about security. All right, good. All right. Have the person first start out, how do they get the security news? What podcasts do they listen to? What security trust groups do they participate in? What security trust groups do they don't have time to participate in? So these are test questions. This kind of gauge things out. What security, gatherers do you see as critical, security issues? What's the latest cutting edge focus? What's the big security risk? Where do you blog? These are things. Say, hey, have your person who's coming to talk to us do this first. Spend 15 minutes, do this. Then you can learn from that, right? Because you will pick their brains. This allows you to pick your brains. So here's an example of how this works. So let's take with me. So you asked the first question, where do I get my security news? My key thing of getting security news is from two lists. One of them is hard to get into, which is CSERP. Thailand Security Emergency Response Team. They put together a really good tool that I use every day with a breakdown of different security news. So as a news aggregator, I'll use them. I look through it. I can look things of interest. And then Dark Reading as a magazine, and then the Dragon News Bite, right? So those are my core things. And I follow them, right? I read through it. I also look at all the news articles posted by my peers in different trust groups. So what I'm doing is, here is a service for everybody here. I try to stay away from, social media like, Facebook, right? I like to be in control of my algorithm, right? Because when you go to like YouTube, you go to Facebook, you don't control your algorithm. They control your algorithm. What you see is controlled by them. What you see is controlled by Facebook. When you're on Facebook, what you see is controlled by Facebook, not by you. What you see on Twitter is controlled by Twitter, not by you. What you see on YouTube is controlled by YouTube, not by you. Flipboard is different. Flipboard, the algorithm, what you see is controlled by you. You control it, and you can actually publish. So I have published a magazine called Surfing Cybersecurity. And what I do is when I go through my SITREP throughout the day, I'm checking articles. I'm checking articles from different sources, and I share them here. So you can subscribe to this, and you can see what I'm reading. You can see what papers I push. You can see the academic papers I push, what tweeters, and a lot of the stuff you see there are not popping up on the security news feeds because they're obscure but critical. It's like, security professionals like me will harp on something and say, that is going to be a problem long before the security press sees it as a problem. So this is something everybody here can tap into, right? Then what podcasts I listen to? There's a bunch of them out there. I listen to 2. Risky Business every week, right? Australia region, one of the best. I like it. They got a nice newsletter. I digest the newsletter. Everybody here can subscribe to the newsletter. very powerful sort of tool. The other one I listen to is Security in Color. Dominique, great, brilliant security professional, and it gives a different aspect to it because we have, I'll talk about this later. I'll point to a podcast I did with Team Cymru where, we got some issues with how we tap into the full security talent in the world, right? And anyways, Dominique talks about that. So she's good security professional on that. So those are the two I listen to. I can't listen to all of them, but I can just fit these two in. What security groups do I participate in? These are trust groups and security groups. MOG first, and then I'm on the Slacks of MOG and Shadow Server and the Service Provider community, which is NetSec Warriors, and a group called Woo Woo. So these kind of like the Slacks I get involved with, trust groups within the Slack. So some of the trust groups have evolved to be inside different Slack groups, right? I've evolved into that. So those are the groups I spend most of my time with and doing different service activities with. MOG being, one of the key ones. No, I'm not at MOG this week. I'm doing APRICOT this week. I committed APRICOT this week. And then you may see me, I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to Dublin for the first conference, but I'm doing things like the ransomware task force and other activities in the first.org, to sign up for, right? Groups I wish I had time to be involved with, Manners, Nanog. I used to be heavily involved with Nanog. I'm not anymore. I do watch the videos. Haven't been to a Nanog in a while. The COVID CTI League and the COVID Cyber Threat Coalition were really good in whacking down miscreant activities during the COVID pandemic. OWASP, I used to be involved with that. I like, really cool group again. And then BEC International is business, the business communications compromise, business executive communication compromise. And that's a good group of doing things, of mitigating factors, and just don't have time, to be involved with. Security conferences I go to, Team Cymru Underground Economy. I always watch Tanfu Cup. Tanfu Cup scares me to death. That's why I watch it all the time. So if you want to find out what's going to come next, there are two groups that you watch. What do you want? Where you find the future security hacking? Tanfu Cup and KiwiCon in New Zealand. Notice they're both in Asia. Tanfu Cup, if you know what Tanfu Cup is basically a big competitive tournament in China that happens every year. And you watch what's going on, and I'll put on my Mandarin translators and Google and things like that. And it's freaking like, how do they figure this stuff out, right? How do they do these break-ins? And the talent base that's there is scary. KiwiCon, same sort of stuff. That's kind of evolved to KawaiiCon, right? ISOI, which will be starting up next year. Digital Crimes Community, which Microsoft runs. CCC, I used to go, that was in Berlin, but that's kind of like up and down. Don't know where that's going these days. And then APRICOT, I'm here at APRICOT, right? I've been involved with APRICOT since the very, very beginning. So those are the groups I go to. The big public service activity I'm doing right now is this thing that you don't probably hear because it's intentional. It's all like a TOP Amber level, which is called DBIT, the Backtrace and Investigative Task Force. Instead of going through and plug into holes on the 20% of source address validation, we have the capability to backtrace spoof flows, working together within, collaborating in the community, and we can plug the holes at the 0.1%. And if you have monitored DDoS levels of activity over the last 6 months, you'll notice that it's going down because we are whacking them and whacking them and whacking them and whacking them with a rhythm of action, right? Every week we whack a bunch down, then next week we do it again, and next week we do it again, and it's turned into tide. So this is one of the big efforts I'm kind of involved with behind the scenes of collaboration on there. Where I see is the next big threats, racial bias and security. You can hear this talk on here. It's worth listening to. It's just James Singh from Team Cymru and I had an interesting talk. It started originally about trust groups like this. And then we started talking about what was the problem sets we had in the community. And the term I used that we have the security problem is so big in the industry, but yet we have a bias problem. And the bias problem is if you are male and you're white and you're from North America or Europe, okay, you're in the club. Everybody else, not. And it's a huge problem. And the way I phrase it to James is, we approach cybersecurity an approach where we're hopping on one foot with our hands tied behind our back, blindfolded and shouting into the wind. And hopping on one leg means guys, a bunch of guys. Hands tied behind our back means we're not tapping into all the talent pool all over the freaking planet, like everybody here in APRICOT, people all over in Latin America and Africa in different languages, right? And we're blindfolded because we don't realize we have these biases, and we're not bringing people into the communities with it. And that's, to me, our number one problem. We don't have enough people to get the work done. And you can listen with James and I talked a bunch about that. And then the ladder on the wrong wall is, we think the problem is packets. The problem's not packets, it's an international justice problem. So we need more and more people to prosecute. If somebody touches your network, take it to the police, go out there, work on prosecute, right? And then the perceptions of security is changed. We're trying to secure too much sometimes, and we're breaking resiliency. And as we get more disasters like we see in Tonga, right, with the, that was a volcano, but we get other disasters out there and floods and things like that from the climate chaos. We need to be able to have the autonomous resiliency like we used to have in the internet. We don't have that anymore. And then I put things in my blog, right? So you can tap into that. And then I'm doing a lot more podcasting in a sense of doing video work, right? And so you can see past work and things like that, and there'll be more and more popped up on here. So one of the places to follow. So go ahead and subscribe to that channel, and you'll see more of these videos along the way with it. So that is, now think of this, every time a security professional comes in, you get that sort of layout, right? Oh, you're a security guru from vendor X, and you get that layout. That's super valuable to you, because you can go through there and say, cool, I didn't know about that, I'll plug into that. I don't know about that group, I can plug into that, right? You can plug into these things, right? So to expand on that, let's go through and talk through it. We talked about the Flipboard one. So here I walk through, and this is not complete. I'm going to be, future sessions, I'm going to actually fill in even more. Because one of the things we've had problems in bringing people into these actionable security trust groups to collaborate and take action is, how do we build trust? How do we build into the community? And so I've been decades thinking through how to do this. And so here's this kind of like next attempt of methodology to bring people in. So one, you start reading what's going on with security, right? So you can use the Flipboard and as a shortcut, because you can see what I'm reading and things like that on it, right? And then find your national CSERP team. So if you go to, and I'll pop this up so people can see it here. If you go to first, you have members, right? And you have your first teams, right? And this is, over 600 teams. And these are like, name the country, right? And you can view all of them over here and say, if I need to find out who to contact, if I'm on Australia, this is the contacts, right? And you reach out to them and get to know them, right? That's the idea here, is you want to reach out to them and get to know them, right? So that way, you meet with them and they will include you into their work, right? Then the next one is get the shadow server daily reports and get on the shadow server mailing list, because the shadow server mailing list is underutilized. You're going to see me actually pop some stuff over onto the shadow server mailing list next week, because I'm going to get some people to start talking about some of the new things, what's going on with it, right? So you pop into that. That's a valuable source. So you see in here, you're starting to get into some feeds here, right? Then subscribe to start with the Five Eyes as a minimal. There's other groups out there, like Europol puts some stuff out, Interpol puts some stuff out, but just starts with the Five Eyes. Go to each of the agencies, CISA, the Australia ACSC, the NCSC, and certain NZ, the Canadian crew, the UK, they all have published alerts and guides, and really pay attention when you see like several collaborate and push out the same information. Then you go like, okay, something's going on. That's an alert mechanism. So now you're getting another valuable critical infrastructure, critical security feed with it. Then find a podcast that resonate to you, right? So I listed the ones that resonate to me, Risky Business and Security in Color. But you go and browse out. There's a lot of really, really, really good podcasts out there, right? And you go for your exercise, go for your walks, you know, put on the podcast, listen to, and it helps you. It helps me. I go out there for my walks, go for a hike, you know, drive in the car, and I listen to the podcast, and I'll be listening to the interviews and the news reviews, and I'll go like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that. Oh, and you start thinking, right? It helps you think. You start, and then you start, oh, I need to get this done. I need to get this done. Here's something idea, right? Oh, I don't have this covered. I got to get this covered in my network. Let me go back and get, that's the helpful. I need to reach out to them. You know, reach out to them. A lot of times I reach out to the people doing the podcast and the people being interviewed. Connected them on LinkedIn and ask them questions. I get them on the phone and we talk, right? So you expand. That's the value of podcasts, very valuable. Now plug in some more data. And there's going to be more data sets I put in here, but start with AlienVault. So AlienVault, everybody here can sign up. It's a open source, community driven. Here's threat indicators. So if you're looking for IOCs, right here, AlienVault sends you an alert. Here's an IOC, here's a threat vector. Then you go back and check your security tools to make sure that you have that IOC covered. So you don't get infected with something, or here's a particular penetration attack or something like that, right? Then you want more, if you want to start building your data sets. Herman Slotman, brilliant. What he has done on his GitHub presence, and you go to his GitHub and you go to the awesome threat intelligence. You want security data, you want vulnerability tools, you want feeds of actually badness out there, you don't pay for it. Go to Herman Slotman's GitHub feed and look at awesome threat intelligence, and you get hundreds of sources that are out there that are not broadcast all over the world, but they're available to you, and it shows you how to sign up for it and get that feed into your system. Whether you use a stick system or a MIP system or something like that, you know, you suck it into, you know, throw it into a Grafana tool, you can pull those feeds into it and you can build your own threat intelligence. A lot of people, they say, oh, I'm going to contract and pay somebody for threat intelligence. Well, what you pay for, a lot of those threat intelligence agencies, they're pulling from this data and making a nice GUI. All right. Worst case, the worst case I ever heard with it was a government was paying $1 million a month for the configure data set. The configure data set was free, but the government didn't know. And some agency was taking the free fee, going to them and says, oh, this is special. And the government was paying $1 million a month for configure. And it was free, right? So notice the theme here. We haven't been paying any money except for like having server resources to do, you know, Grafana or log processing or stuff like that. All right, then plug into some more news resources. You want to Flipboard, my Flipboard feed is kind of like get you started, but then you start signing into these different news feeds. Recorded Future and Dragon News Bites are good, minimal overlap. In other words, what Recorded Future reports and what the DNB, the Dragon News Bites reports has a minimal overlap. So you're not going to get the same thing. Sometimes threat feed consolidates to like overlap with each other. They're like reporting the same thing, right? And so you get a contrast between the two of them. If you can get the CSERP one, reach out to CSERP, that's a good one. It's a little bit harder to get access to. And start pulling more data in. Malware Information Sharing Project. It's huge, all right? You know, this is a tool where you can pull in everything that you can pull in to actually see what's going on, right? And what's it cost you? Servers and disk space. Open source tools. You have at first.org, you can start at first.org and MOG, and they have a list. They have, if you go to the GitHub from this, say here's a kickstart. So here's like, you know, 16 feeds you sign up to, and all of a sudden you kickstart with your data sets. Then you go to First and you get more data sets because this is coming from all the First members. And you go to MOG, you get their data sets. And all of a sudden you'll be sitting on this huge data set that now you got like, here's what's going on with malware and viruses and, botnets and IOCs coming out all over the place and, threat indicators. And then you can take telemetry on your network and tap it into that and feed it to others, right? Because that's the kind of idea with it, is to build this collective with it. So now you're getting, data sets, right? Then you got to invest in yourself too. Sign up the Ninja Jobs. So Ninja Jobs is created by security professionals for security professionals. So we know about all the jobs that are not published on LinkedIn. So every now and then you say like, I want to, like somebody was asking earlier, oh, maybe I want to be like a security professional instead of a network engineer. Ken, here you go. Sign up on Ninja Jobs and you see the list, right? A lot of the jobs are work remote. They're geographically remote. So you notice on this list, this list will continue. So version 2.0 of this, I'm going to add more and more things in here. And then some of my peers will add into that. And the idea is to build up your involvement so that when you go into the different security communities and trust groups and conferences, you're really plugged in and people go like, wow, we need you as part of this community because you're really plugged into what's going on. So this is kind of like the stepping stone to get you where you're really plugged in. You see what's happening. You're not going in blind or clueless into a situation. This gets you clued in, right? That's the whole intent around that, is to get you clued in with that. So I hope this has been valuable to everybody. I hope people connect up and follow on LinkedIn, follow the YouTube channel, so you can see as we do futures of these. This is going to evolve. So what happens on after this is we'll take these APRICOT recordings, and I'm going to be talking to more of my peers, and we'll talk about how can we make everything better, and what are we missing, what all the materials we need to do, right? Because that DBIT effort I mentioned, one of the swim lanes of activity that we're doing is let's really build up the empowerment tools. Because what we're noticing as we're going through and working with different operators, we're noticing that new generations of engineers don't know this stuff. What's a remote turbo black hole? What is, I talked to one individual who's in charge of incident response for this one company and says, oh, congratulations, you got, this is a big responsibility. Have you worked with the first.org before? They go, what's first.org? They have no idea. All right, so it's plugged in so you kind of know these things out there. And we're going to be filling in the gaps so that way you can take, educate you who are coming here, but then we got to look at your young engineers who you're going to hire next, and how do we bring them into the fold, right? So it's always this generational, right, sort of empowerment that we want to do. And we love everybody's suggestions. If you're saying, hey, we're missing this, we're missing that, missing this, please email, send me a note, send me a chat, WhatsApp, Signal, LinkedIn, all those. So thanks, everybody. I think we're going to come off of the share, and then we can stop the recording, and then people can ask all the questions they don't want to ask in public.
We want to record the questions for posterity, or not so much the questions, more the answers.
Any questions? Anybody got any questions? I guess not, Philip. You're not going to get the answers for that. Oh, from a security point of view, do you have any knowledge about MTU setting values? I haven't thought about it in a while from a security standpoint view, but I know it's something that I've looked at because of buffer bloats and the settings on it. That's a good one, Maz. Maz always throws the hard questions that you have to scratch your head.
Or maybe he's giving you homework, so you come back tomorrow with an answer.
Yeah, I'll go look at it and see if I talk to some engineers who are touching routers these days. As a transit provider, I can protect my own control plane, but what your opinion on messing with the data plane for customers? I'm not quite sure the context of that. If you may want to come off mute and ask the question. Brett, if you want to do that.
I was just, should one ever, as a transit provider who's providing, global IP to a customer, start messing with the type of data that a customer should transmit and receive?
Oh, yes. You put that in your terms and conditions. So when you look at there's that document I pointed out, which was the exploitable port filtering. A big part of the exploitable port filtering was the guidelines that you put posted to your customers and in your terms and conditions to say that these are ports we're just not going to carry. Here is when we filter and not filter. Here's when, if you're doing abusive, we can do things with it. As a carrier, there's this misperception that you can't touch anything as it transits, but that's not it. And in the next room to me, my wife is on a call, but she was part of the WOTC group that did the internet is regulatory wise is built on this value-added network services agreement from a regulatory standpoint. That is the law that says, here's what you can do acceptable use work on customer traffic and what you can do with it. And there was never a restriction to say, I can't touch it. As a commercial operator, what you do is you make sure it's in your terms and conditions. And then you could do things.
Oh, well, I mean, in terms of protecting my network, I will do anything I can help police customer traffic. But there is a quite completely valid use case for a person to use SNMP across the internet. And if I start restricting SNMP and their service no longer works, that's going to be a bad customer experience.
Right. And so what you have happen is I think Cox does this. Cox restricts SNMP. It's all policy. And then you go in there and you call the help desk. Hey, I can't get SNMP to work. They say, oh, follow this procedure. And then we open it up for you.
Well, so then you've got your, completely consumer grade customers. They have a very, very heavy set of restrictions and URPF and all of the above. But our transit providers, other RSPs who are getting an internet feed from us, that's not a default position for them. And so it depends on the grade of customer. Absolutely, consumer, we
right. So that'll be
very tightly.
Yeah, you got a good point there on the type of customer with it, which is why you kind of craft it in here's my acceptable use procedures and here's the policies that I do. So it's very clear, because the key thing is just here's what I do and make it very clear, and then it becomes a business decision. But some companies just say, oh, we can't do anything. So yeah, you can. You just put it, here's what we do, and then it's transparent to the customer. And then, some customers, they say, I don't want, these restrictions, and you have a policy bypass. Yeah. So good question, Brett. And then Gary said, if we block Telnet into our network, we're also blocking for our customers feeding off our network. It could. But see, on the block the Telnet, notice what I said on there with that process is the first thing you do is you're blocking, the Telnet is being blocked on your VTY access list, right? So you do an explicit permit. Only the source addresses from your own network goes into the VTY access list. And then on the infrastructure side, you shouldn't see source addresses not from your block coming from another country. That shouldn't happen. That's I didn't say block Telnet at that point. Some organizations might do that. If you look at the exploitable port filter, but Telnet is not one of the ones on exploitable port filtering for that. Good questions.
And probably again on the transit provider side, we have that many customer routes that having static access lists preventing spoofing inbound across all of our borders with thousands of peers and thousands of prefixes, that's unmanageable in our current environment. So automation could be a solution there, but yeah, it's a lot of access lists, a lot of updating.
And that used to be an issue, but there are automation capabilities out there. So like one of the, we got people who are using Ansible to do that. The netconf configuration capabilities So the idea there is, as I take these materials and we go around to the operators who are doing that sort of telemetry, then we get it into sessions like, APRICOT, Nanog, RIPE, say, here is how you do this task. We get it recorded, and here's the scripts, and here's the tools, so that way people can replicate what other operators have done, right? And so that's a good request, Brett, of putting out there. Says, okay, how do I scale when I can't use unicast RPF, I got to use access list, and I have 10,000 customers. How do I manage the configuration for 10,000 customers and keep it straight? And in a DevOps, NetOps world, it's totally doable these days. What we need to do in a forum like APRICOT is pull together the materials to help you guys go like, that's how it's going on. Good, thank you.
A lot of great questions. Hoping for more. We've probably exhausted them all.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Barry. So it's the 4th day done and dusted. Thanks again for a great tutorial for the last couple of hours. Really appreciate it. Also, thank you to Internet Society for being our training partner this week. Really appreciate their support. And yes, so this tutorial carries on tomorrow. So hope you'll all come back and hear the final installments. So thank you all. Wish you an enjoyable rest of the day. Thank you, Barry.
All right. Bye-bye.